It's easy enough to call an election historic after what we've been through over the last year or so. But municipal elections this November probably qualify. The last time a sitting mayor declined to run for re-election was during World War II. Atlanta's last one-term mayor was Sam Massell in 1974. This year, someone other than Keisha Lance Bottoms will take the seat. At least 6 of Atlanta's 15 city council members will be new next year, as will the city council president and 3 out of 9 school board members, minimum. There are 26 jobs up for election and 22 have a contest. And so election season descends upon us again. We've chosen people from different parts of the city with different backgrounds in politics to give you a chance to see something of yourself in them. We're asking them about what they're looking for in leadership and what issues are driving their neighborhoods to the polls. Atlanta's 2021 election. We have to talk about it on the next Atlanta. I'm George Cheedy. We're at the Center for Civil and Human Rights, and I'm with Carla Lightfoot Causey, who is the chair of the Land Use and Zoning Committee for the East Atlanta Community Association.
Yes.
I'm incredibly grateful to have you. Carla, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get a look at how East Atlanta is looking at the election that's coming up. So what are people talking about in East Atlanta? What matters to voters?
Probably the same with everyone around the city, but the conversations we have more often deal with infrastructure. It also deals with not lanes, but infrastructure and transportation, and also the environment.
Gotcha. Interesting that crime isn't like the top issue. Or am I misreading that?
No, crime is there, but it's not our top one. We actually recently did a survey, I don't say recently, a few months ago, a survey that spoke to what are the issues that concern you most in the neighborhood. Crime was on there, but one of the top ones dealt with our infrastructure, dealt with our transportation, land use, of course, and then crime was on there. I'm not sure if it even was a top 5. We've had a reduction in many ways.
So let's talk about infrastructure. Like what needs to get built? What's broken?
Some of the challenges that we have, even with, say, with new developments, and then for those who are already there, we have issues with the watershed. We have problems with the streets, the streetscape. Lots of accidents, routes. It's really about
That's interesting.
Well, I've got one location, they seem to have about 4 or so a month. Just street racing.
Street racing?
Street racing is a part of it.
Where is this?
This is on Moreland Avenue, but it also goes inside the community somewhat, sometimes on flat shoals.
I think I can
and Boulder
picture
Crest.
this, yeah. So here's a question, like, are there, without naming specific names, like, are the people who are running for public office, do they get this? Is it the sort of thing that's granular enough in the conversations they're having with folks like you and your neighbors for them to go, yeah, I'll vote for that person?
Yes. I do believe they get it. It's specifically about we're in District 5 and we had a candidate forum through land use and zoning, but also with transportation. And the questions were very specific, dealing with transportation, the different infrastructure pieces, watershed issues, a lot of that, environmental, and they spoke to them directly. So they are interested. They seem to have a good understanding of it in our area, not just, the entire district, I guess, with Kirkwood and Arlington and all the others, but they definitely spoke to it.
So there's a big zoning overhaul that's being proposed for the city. What I want to know is whether or not the neighborhood, whether or not that's impactful enough to them to win a vote one way or another.
It's impactful that it should make a difference as far as where the votes go, but I don't believe, to be quite honest, that most people understand it. Like you said, it's a lot of things there. What I do on my end is to break it down in enough pieces to give it to the community. So what does this mean to me? How does this impact me? Where I'm standing here right now, if I just blink and did nothing else, how's this going to affect me?
Can you give us a 30-second breakdown of what's on the table with regard to the zoning changes?
One of the biggest ones is that the zoning changes that we know about, it takes away all parking requirements. We're going from there are residential designations that go from R1 down to R5. That depends on the size of the lot. Each of the lots, whether it be oversized or small lots, will now again they'll have no parking requirements, but they also allow you to build as an individual what we call small apartments that go anywhere from 1 to 4 units on a parcel that could be less than 0.2 acres, and it goes up to 12 units.
So more density in the neighborhoods that had existed before.
Correct. And there's no controls. Well, there are some controls, but it doesn't mean that each of the owners has an opportunity to take advantage of this new provision that would come under this MRMU, which is a multi-residential, multi-unit type zoning. So you and your single family home, because your lot may be slightly smaller, you're not able to take advantage of tearing down your home and building a 12 unit or even a 4 unit in order to get the revenues from that. So you get pretty much blocked out of it. You don't have controls on your next door neighbor here or here. So these could go up for 12 and here you are.
Sounds like you have a sense of what you think about this zoning.
Well, no. I do see some good things in it, and I see some that need to be refined a bit. I understand what the goal is, and the goal is quite noble, and it needs to be addressed. But how it's being addressed is the question.
So what criteria are you using to evaluate candidates for you and for your neighbors?
I like to see that there has been some action or some activity with that particular candidate in the community, not just their home community, but the entire district that they're looking at. I know we're probably going to talk about Merrill, but that's one of those for me. I like to see what they've done in the past as far as on a professional level, methodology. If they have any, the ability to do networking, and have they done that networking, and how do they activate the network that they have? There are many of the candidates who have a network, but those networks don't appear to have been activated, or they're on a more active corporate level rather than on a community level. So those are things I look at. Can you network? Can you get the job done? Are you responsive to the people? Do you answer that call? Do you answer that email? Or are you I'll just pass it down the road type situation? And there's enough information about all of the candidates out there in order to get that sense of where they are and how you feel that you would be able to work with them.
Okay. Carla, thank you for telling us about East Atlanta. I'm so grateful for you. I'm glad that you've been able to take some time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm George Cheedy. We're at the Center for Civil and Human Rights, and this is The Next Atlanta. I'm here with Courtney Smith, who is, among other things, the president of the Midtown Neighbors Association. I'm incredibly grateful to have you here.
Thank you, George.
So we have an election on.
We do. Just a few.
Just a few. We have several elections on. We have 26 elections on. And I want to get a feel for what Midtown is thinking right now. Mm-hmm. Broadly, what are the things that people are talking about politically? Your friends, your neighbors, the people around you.
So in my position, I interact with residents all the time. And in Midtown, we're fortunate to have so many. We have 27,000 residents in Midtown. So it's a pretty big selection of people. However, what I hear is primarily about crime, infrastructure projects, code enforcement, the future of zoning and how that's going to develop our city, and creative, I would say actually going back to crime, creative solutions to crime fighting.
So let's talk about crime a bit. The Midtown's actually been hit harder than most neighborhoods in the city on crime.
I disagree with you.
Tell me.
I really do. I think that it depends on the type of crime you're talking about. If you're talking about, car break-ins and auto theft, We do have some pretty high numbers. But when you start talking about violent crime, we have had an increase, but there are other neighborhoods that are struggling.
Do your neighbors perceive this? Like, do they understand that there's a difference between the car break-in rate and the violent crime rate? How is your neighborhood reacting to crime politically? Like, what are their expectations?
I think their expectations is that we're always working to improve that, that we are never complacent, regardless of what the crime numbers are. Do I think they understand the difference between low-level nonviolent crime and violent crime? I do. I think Midtown is a very sophisticated neighborhood with highly engaged residents. Do I think that when we wake up every morning and we read the news and we're reading about crime throughout the city, that it can change the way that we might feel? Maybe, but it doesn't necessarily relate to only your Midtown neighborhood.
Gotcha. So we're talking about creative solutions a little
Yeah.
bit. Tell me what has currency? The candidates have said, I want to do X, Y, or Z. Like, what's resonating in terms of creative solutions?
The term community policing is used a lot. And I would say that in Zone 5 and Zone 6, we have enjoyed a great relationship with our APD. And we've also been the beta test for PAD, Policing Alternatives and Diversion. So, we have been working with nonprofit organizations that provide community outreach and also the APD within our civic associations for a long time. We have regular meetings with them. They are super responsive, and we are willing to do our part to contribute to safety. Because what residents don't always understand and voters don't always understand is it's not just the job of APD to solve public safety. It's the job of our city council people to write proper legislation so that they have the tools they need. But it's also our job as community members to be looking and doing what we can do to deter crime.
Gotcha. So let's talk about services in the city. And
Services like trash pickup?
like trash pickup.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I talk about that a little bit.
I hear it's not hitting on all cylinders.
It's not. They have staffing constraints.
So what are the things that really get people riled up? Like the sorts of things that will cause someone to vote for one candidate or another. Tell me what are the complaints?
What gets people really riled up? Well, first of all, people need to feel safe first. So that's why crime is always discussed so predominantly. But I would say that in Midtown, what I hear is a frustration with new ideas before the current ideas are executed very well. For instance, in Midtown, we have 2 road projects that have been talked about, designed, and engaged with the community on for years.
Which ones?
Juniper and Piedmont. We would love to see those break ground.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Juniper is about 12 years in the making.
12 years.
And so we need city government to run more efficiently. And I know that that's not new news. I know that's something that people say about their city nationwide. But we have a chance to go to the voter box and to put people in those leadership positions that can really make that happen.
What do you want to hear from a political figure that says, you get my neighborhood?
Compromise and collaboration. I think people are tired. I think people are tired of fighting. I think the combative nature of just fighting for your position all the time is not going to get us anywhere. So we need people who want to lead our community in that way. And I think sometimes compromise is considered a position of weakness. I think it's considered a position of strength because you've been able to evaluate the priorities, work with someone who disagrees with you, and come to a solution where you can move forward. That's strength.
Got it. There was a controversial vote on the Atlanta Prison Farm police training facility. Do you think it will impact votes? Do you think people care enough about that to vote one way or another?
I think in my experience with the mayoral forums that I've attended, most of the candidates support moving forward. I hope that we can move forward.
Okay. Ms. Smith, I'm incredibly grateful for your time here. That's exactly what we needed to hear. We have a better sense of what Midtown is about today.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm George Cheedy, and we're at the Center for Civil and Human Rights. This is The Next Atlanta. And I'm with Mark Cady Boyd, who's chairman of Helping Empower Youth, which is an organization that has been working very closely with young people who have been selling water on the streets of Atlanta. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So today you are functionally representing Southside Atlanta. And I want to get a sense of the politics of Southside Atlanta. What are people talking about where you live?
Well, in general, they're talking about the buzzwords that we're hearing all the candidates talk about: the crime, the gentrification, but a lot school is on a lot of people's mind, education.
So what is it about schools that you think is animating people enough to vote for one candidate or another? What are the specific issues that people are talking about?
Closing schools is a big thing. That's been a big thing over the last several years. Underfunding schools, that's another thing. Curriculum has obviously been a hotbed item, but not necessarily here in the metro. Everybody's, the whole critical race thing, everybody is kind of united behind learning actual history and everything. So it's not a divisive kind of thing.
Is that enough to draw a person's vote, do you think?
I think so. Because I think they don't want their kid indoctrinated. And I think there's a visceral reaction when somebody feels as though you're trying to teach their kid something that even if they want to be like, there's a whole I'm not racist kind of thing. They want to not seem racist, but it comes out obviously in their choices of what, in their actions. So, yeah.
So I find the work that you're doing with children fascinating. You've just taken over the house that Katherine Johnston
Yes, sir.
used to live in. Tell me more about that a little.
Katherine Johnston was a 90-plus-year-old young lady, lived in a neighborhood in Vine City, and the police planted drugs in her home,
And
killed her, subsequently murdered her, lied about it, went to trial. That whole thing was, happened.
Your organization has her house now and is
Correct.
using it as a staging area for the work that you're doing.
We are remodeling her home. It sat empty for a number of years, 15 plus years, I believe. And yes, sir, we're now remodeling it in order to be able to do programming from it. And we're going to turn it in kind of a memorial space for her and to let people know about police brutality as well.
So it's interesting, these broad questions of racial discrimination and police brutality, the things that had people in the street a year ago, are they animating people today in terms of which candidates are speaking to them and whether or not they're going to win their vote?
I don't speak for all of Atlanta when I say this or anything, obviously, but if I could say this, I don't think that's an Atlanta problem, if that makes sense. It's Atlanta that we just got finished talking about Atlanta murdering an older lady. We don't have necessarily like the police kind of tensions that other cities have with the day-to-day citizens. Atlanta citizens call for more police, if anything. You have the ones that actually vote, because you have candidates hollering, I want to put this many police, this many, out jockeying each other. So I think when the rubber hits the road, Atlanta citizens are somewhere in between there, and they're not as far left on the whole defunding police and getting rid of police. They're getting ready to do they just shamelessly voted for a whole multi-million-dollar police facility where the neighborhood, and I was part of this, but the neighborhoods were totally against it and wanted a green space. But they said, like I say, shamelessly went right along with putting the police academy there, so.
And so this is the thing, like here we are, we're a month out from an election. Like these issues have been animating people in their discussions, but it sounds like it's not enough to push somebody into voting for this person as opposed to that person?
I think a lot of those narratives may have been a little bit more media driven than were grassroots, Atlanta driven, at least, especially when it comes to the whole, we just finished talking about the defunding police thing and things like that. Yeah, I think it was a little outside, and it was a popular narrative for it. There was also a presidential election coming up at the time as well, so that always gets drug out.
What else are people talking about? What are the things that are neighborhood level issues?
Basically, they feel like the current administration just checked out on them long ago, and they can't even get basic functioning government. They were just like a competent somebody. I can call you and you're gonna answer. I can email you and you're at least gonna say, I recognize that you're a breathing voter, so that would be nice.
Wouldn't it though? Mark, I'm grateful you've been here. This is an excellent perspective. Like this was very important.
Thanks.
I'm deeply grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm George Chidi. We're at the Center for Civil and Human Rights. This is The Next Atlanta. And I'm with Deborah Wathen, who's the vice president?
Vice chair.
Vice chair of the Buckhead Council of Neighborhoods. So here we are. It's an election again. And elections are nuts most of the time. This one feels especially fraught. I want to start with the Buckhead city movement. Strikes me as an outsider looking in as divisive. I'm trying to get a feel for what people in Buckhead are talking about in the context of the elections that are in front of them.
Well, I feel like it's divided. I don't know if it's divisive, but it has divided Buckhead. There's clear lines, people who want it, people who don't. To me, the most important thing is that people concentrate on the election at hand and elect the best mayor and city council and that they can possibly elect moving forward, because we don't know what's going to happen.
Do you think it's getting in the way of that normal conversation that you have at election time?
I do believe it's going to get in the way, but hopefully people will take the time to get out and vote. Buckhead is notorious for not coming out in strong numbers, and so we're hoping to really get people to focus on the election and take care of this issue before they move on to the Buckhead City movement.
So aside from the Buckhead City movement, what's animating Buckhead voters right now?
Well, of course, it's crime. I mean, everybody's talking about crime.
As an avid watcher of crime statistics, and I've spent a lot of time writing about it, Buckhead's crime, at least on paper, is lower than the rest of the cities. That doesn't do a lot of good to somebody who feels afraid. What are you looking to hear from candidates on this issue?
Well, I think everybody in Buckhead would like to see the police staff, the force increased. We feel like more police is very important. I don't think it's the only factor to reducing crime, but it's very important in Buckhead for us to see us do that. But I think the next mayor needs to make sure that we have an environment where our policemen feel like this is a great place to work. We want to be in Atlanta. We're paid well, and this is where I want to be. I feel supported by the administration, and I think that's going to be the key to getting the police built up.
With regard to public safety, are there any other ideas or discussion points that you think are animating your neighbors?
Well, the tearing down of the jail was a big issue in Buckhead. I mean, people did not want to see it destroyed. I understand that it's a symbol, and not a good one necessarily, but we have to have a place to put people, and I think that's a message that we would like to see heard, is that if you are a criminal and a violent one, you need to go to jail. And the financial side of that is, as a citizen of Atlanta, I don't want to tear down the jail in Atlanta and pay to have it torn down, and then as a citizen of Fulton County, pay to have a new jail built. I mean, if they can get together on that issue, I think it would be great.
What else is on the mind of your neighbors?
city services and infrastructure are two more huge issues.
What would win your vote with regard to this?
I think we need somebody with leadership qualities. We need somebody to go to City Hall, get to work, and get those employees doing what they need to do. I meet so many city employees on a daily basis, and they're awesome. Every one of them's awesome. But they need the tools, they need the leadership, they need the equipment. They need all those things put in place for them to get their job done. It's not that they're not trying, they just need those tools.
I get that. Infrastructure is the other one. I have been stuck on Peachtree Street in my car for longer than I would care to talk about on some days. Are there any projects that you think matter significantly enough to people in Buckhead to win a vote?
Well, we have an issue with roads. We have all the traffic coming through our neighborhoods, and it's not good when you have people trying to get to work and it's bumper to bumper traffic and kids can't cross the street to get a school bus. So getting traffic through to Buckhead is an issue, and because of that, our roads are torn up. They're in bad shape, and we need them paved, and we need to make sure that that infrastructure money is there and that is equitably divided amongst the city. I think sometimes people think Buckhead has what they need and they forget about us, but we need our streets paved also.
There's been a lot of talk about how to address inequality in the city of Atlanta. What I don't know is to what degree that actually turns into political action or a vote, where people will look at that and go, yeah, that's worth voting for. Yes, this person is worth voting for because they're saying something along these lines that matter. Is this a discussion happening in Buckhead at all?
I don't know that it's a discussion. It is important. I mean, I think not only do we need to increase the police force, but we need to address the root causes of crime, and poverty is one of them. Housing inequality is another issue that needs to be addressed.
Gotcha. Is there anything else going on in Buckhead that somebody who's an outside observer looking in going, like, that's what Buckhead cares about?
Well, zoning has been a big issue lately.
Yeah, there's this huge zoning thing that they're talking about.
That's correct. I'm a big believer in the MPU system that Mayor Maynard Jackson put into effect. And I think that City Hall is not listening to their MPUs. MPUs know their neighborhood. The city's divided up into 26, I think, different areas, and those people know their neighborhoods. They know what they need, and the city needs to revamp that system and really listen to their citizens and what they need. And zoning is one of those issues.
I better understand Buckhead now that we've had this conversation.
Well, thank you again. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Four people, four neighborhoods. Very different neighborhoods, very different people, very different issues. Some of it rhymes, even if it's not the same. The things that motivate voters don't generally change year to year. But I think it's clear that some things are standing out. Crime, infrastructure, services, and the quality and content of schools. We've given you a lot to think about and some resources to use. I invite you to watch this episode again and each of the previous thought-provoking episodes on The Next Atlanta. Just log on to fox5atlanta.com. Go to the shows section at the bottom of the page and click on The Next Atlanta. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon for the next episode of The Next Atlanta.